are these people?
This guy.
Yeah, well, these men. But as I said earlier, so Leonard Peltier got a lot of press, I would say, generally within mainstream and even the independent media, which I think makes sense. But this kind of went under the radar. And as I said, shout out to DJ Joe Nice, friend of the network and to the show, who posted this on Instagram, I believe, last weekend. Well, the weekend before, like the weekend, inauguration weekend.
Right.
So I didn't know about this until he did, and looking at it initially, I was kind of like, why would Biden pardon Marcus Garvey, like of all people, especially given that the man has been dead for over 80 years. But in learning more about the reasonings why and the people behind it makes a ton of sense. And I think just another example of the symbolism that Black people get in terms of Democrats giving a nudge, nudge, wink, wink in terms to, hey, we support you and we love you, but not actually giving any tangibles that would really help Black people. So, so we're going to get into this, as I said, because in light of the Leonard Peltier clemency that he received, Marcus Garvey, who is a well-known Black activist, especially within the Caribbean, like that's where my parents are from. You know, my dad's Pan-African. You know, heard about Marcus Garvey a ton growing up.
Yeah.
So
my Jamaican man.
So obviously, like he's definitely, like I wouldn't say one of my dad's heroes, but he's definitely someone that my dad does refer to a lot in as far as, Black nationalism, but Black in terms of the diaspora of Black people coming together, and like really having a collective sense of pride in who we are as a people.
Yeah, he's up there with Haile Selassie and all the Jamaican heroes.
Right. So which even in that sense is kind of like, why would Biden, and not to say people don't know of him here, but I don't think he gets as much.
Maybe Biden's secretly Rastafarian and we don't know.
Well, as I said, there is a reason why he did.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a reason why he did, and and those of you in the chat will probably be able to figure this out if you watched our show long enough. But here's the thing with this show.
Oh, sorry, we're not allowed to do Grace Jones. Gotcha.
Oh, I will say also to be somewhat transparent, I was going to use World Socialist website. There was an article that I saw about this pardon in relation to Garvey. I decided not to use it, given now I believe the person who wrote it is African American, but I felt like it kind of, well, here's the thing. Like, I think because we generally deify a lot of our heroes, or a lot of people in political spectrum, that we tend to hype up the good that they do, and especially when they do bad stuff, like that's often also kind of pronounced as well.
Yeah, more so in some respects.
Right. I think more so. And I felt like the way that this the writer of the article that I did read first felt a little leading towards more negative stuff about Garvey. That's not to say that Garvey
is perfect.
Isn't right. None of our heroes are. We're all human. We're all nuanced. But I felt in this case, and especially being one, if you study history, we often tend to read of the stories that from the winning side more often than not, or the majority side, and often not the people that it affects personally. So instead of reading that, I decided, well, what are other people from the Caribbean and what are Jamaicans in particular saying about this?
Right.
So I pulled this article instead. So I do want to preface that because I think it's important to kind of understand, any figure in history, has their good and their bad points, and they should be highlighted. But we often hear of, stories where they come from in terms of, like the people in majority, or often like establishment talking points more often than not. So, and we never hear like the voices of who this would affect. So,
Right.
so that's why I decided to do here. Now, it would have been fair to read both, but I think for time, I wanted to read this. So, so I pulled this from Jamaica magazine, where I think it was just an editorial write-up, but they write, Marcus Garvey's arrest and pardon, writing a century-old injustice 85 years after his death. So we'll see what Jamaicans have to say regarding this pardon. Marcus Garvey, the pioneering leader of the Pan-African movement and Jamaica's first national hero, received a posthumous pardon from U.S. President Joe Biden on January 19th. The pardon, achieved through decades of advocacy and successful lobbying of the Congressional Black Caucus, that should tell you everything you need to know, is just the start of righting a historical wrong in an effort to restore Mark Garvey's legacy and reaffirm his enduring influence on global Black liberation. To fully appreciate this moment, it is essential to revisit Garvey's movement, the turbulent political climate of the 1920s, the challenges Garvey faced from his critics and the U.S. government, and the legacy he left for future generations of Black leaders. So this is the reason why he was pardoned. Essentially, it was more or less a favor to the Black Congressional Caucus, also known as the Congressional Black Crows, who do nothing but symbolism, but never demand any tangibles that actually would affect people tangibly in terms of the needs of what Black people need, like what Black people need.
Hail as old as time.
Yep, I told you were going to go. So yep. But anyway, born in Jamaica in 1887, the Right Excellence Marcus Mosiah Garvey was the first to create a movement dedicated solely to the liberation and empowerment of Black people on a global scale. As the founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, Garvey sought to unite people of African descent worldwide, promoting economic independence, cultural pride, and the vision of a self-sustaining Black nation. His Pan-Africanist ideals resonated deeply, especially among African Americans living under the harsh realities of Jim Crow segregation. The UNIA's ambitious initiatives, including the Black Star Line Shipping Company, symbolized Markey's call for Black economic self-sufficiency and the eventual reparation to Africa. His bold vision inspired millions and later influenced iconic figures like Malcolm X, MLK, and Nelson Mandela. Garvey's movement was the foundation upon which future Black nationalist and civil rights movements would be built. So obviously, we kind of talked about this in a similar way with our patron saint, Kwame Ture, kind of, kind of building upon what Garvey kind of started, especially with the Black Power movement, that he would become, let's say, a red flag within the establishment.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, the United States in the 1920s was rife with racial tension. The Ku Klux Klan experienced a resurgence, and Jim Crow laws perpetuated systemic discrimination against African Americans. In this hostile environment, Marcus Garvey emerged as a powerful advocate for Black pride, economic self-sufficiency, and unity. Garvey's message challenged the entrenched racial order, alarming both white authorities and conservative Black leaders. His call for a return to Africa and the creation of a self-sustaining Black nation offered a radical alternative to the prevailing strategies of assimilation and integration championed by figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, who headed the NAACP, critical of Garvey's separatist approach, which he deemed impractical. He opposed the Back to Africa movement, viewing it as counterproductive to the progress of African Americans in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Du Bois and labor leader A. Philip Randolph spearheaded the Garvey Must Go campaign, which sought to discredit his leadership and dismantle his movement. They criticized his financial management of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and projects like the Black Star Line, accusing him of exploiting the hopes of African Americans. On January 15, 1923, 8 prominent African Americans set a petition to U.S. Attorney General Harry M. Daugherty, urging the government to continue prosecuting Marcus Garvey for mail fraud. They also requested an investigation into violent instances linked to Garvey followers. This internal opposition aligned with a broader campaign by the U.S. government to silence Harvey. J. Edgar Hoover, then an ambitious agent in the Bureau of Investigation, later the FBI, viewed Garvey as a dangerous radical and made him one of the first Black leaders to be targeted by federal surveillance.
Arguably enough, Du Bois and Philip Randolph also would have been in the same boat. But,
right. So that should tell you something, that if they weren't necessarily caught up in this, then I think you can put 2 and 2 together, I would argue, in some ways. Yeah. Anyway, Hoover's efforts culminated in Garvey's arrest in 1922 on charges of mail fraud related to the Black Star Line. Efforts to clear Garvey's name began almost immediately after his deportation, but gained significant traction in recent decades. Advocates argued that his conviction was less about criminal wrongdoing and more about silencing a leader who dared to challenge the racial and political status quo. In the decades following Garvey's deportation to Jamaica in 1927, petitions for his exoneration gained momentum but repeatedly failed to gain traction. It was the Congressional Black Caucus, however, that finally succeeded in bringing Garvey's case to the forefront. Citing the political motivations behind his conviction, the caucus presented a compelling case to President Biden, emphasizing Garvey's pivotal role in laying the groundwork for the civil rights movement. Garvey's influence has reverberated through generations. Leaders like Malcolm X credited Garvey's teachings as a foundation to their own philosophies. The Black Panther Party, with its emphasis on self-determination and community empowerment, drew heavily from Garvey's ideals. Even Martin Luther King, though an integrationist, acknowledged Garvey's importance. Yes. Thank you. Stating he was the first man on a mass scale to give millions of Negroes a sense of dignity and destiny. Garvey's Pan-Africanist vision also inspired movements for decolonization across Africa, influencing leaders like Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. His ideas remain central to discussions on racial equality and economic justice, serving as a beacon for marginalized communities worldwide. Thoughts?
I mean, sounds about right. I mean, I can see why J. Edgar Hoover would have an issue with him, you know? So, I mean, and the fact that the Black Caucus is, I mean, he's such a, like, figurehead now that, like, you know, it's similar to how things like the FBI tweet that, you know, it's Martin Luther King Day or whatever, even though they were directly involved in his assassination. You know, it's like, to me, it's very similar. It's a lot of like, it just feels performative from them. You know, like they could do things in honor of, right? Like not just pardoning him, but like, I don't know, anything actually tangible, you know?
Right. You know, and again, he died in 1940. So sure, it might be nice, but again, it's symbolic in terms of what it meant. And even, you know, again,
which says so much about the Democratic Party, where it's all symbolism and
but
none of it really well thought out.
But DJ Joe Nice brought up a good point, you know, like, and I wish I saved it, but unfortunately he wrote it as a story, so I wasn't able to get to it before it, after the 24-hour period. But he mentioned, you know, you could do someone like Assange who needs to be pardoned. You can do take your pick of someone who's actually living
Snowden,
to actually pardon them,
20
for
people.
crimes that, right. So you could pardon, and this is one thing that within that World Socialist website said, you could pardon dreamers, in terms of what they need. But no, you end up, and I don't want to say obscure, but I would argue African Americans do not know Marcus Garvey like that to make it significant, So, like, if you are of Caribbean descent and living here, that's one thing, but I don't think it wouldn't be like Malcolm X or MLK here. Like, he's not going to gain that kind of traction here. In terms, and like I said, I wouldn't have known about it had it not been shown on social media. I know it did. This kind of got around a little bit on mainstream media, but not that much.
Yeah.
And even then, it probably was on local news sources, like in New York in particular, where obviously that would be
and it would only be just tongue baths for whoever did it,
Right. Yeah. So I just saw this more as symbolism, but nothing, just it's a nice thing that Biden did,
It reminds me of all them getting out in fucking kente cloth, honestly.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, yeah, same energy.
Yeah.
So as I said earlier, I wanted to get the viewpoint of, I think it's important to get a viewpoint of people who this affects the most. So why not hear from a Jamaican to hear what they have to say about this? So this is YouTuber Dion Jackson Miller. Never heard about her prior to when I pulled together the story. And I think we'll play the whole thing she talks about for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But I think she brings up some good points regarding, his pardon, from her standpoint as a Jamaican. So be prepared to hear, I mean, you heard it last night, a very thick Jamaican accent.
I'm fine with
that. But we'll discuss after we watch the clip. So you can go ahead when you're ready.
So U.S. President Joe Biden pardoned Jamaica's first national hero, Marcus Garvey, on his last full day in office. But I don't think it matters that much. Why do I say that? Stay tuned. I'm Dion Jackson Miller, and I've got the tea.
Better be hibiscus.
Okay, so a statement came from the White House on Sunday, January 19, 2025, saying that U.S. President Joe Biden was issuing a posthumous pardon, meaning after his death, for Jamaica's first national hero, Marcus Garvey. Garvey had been convicted of mail fraud in 1922 in the United States. That is, according to the U.S. Postal Service, mail fraud is a scheme to get money or something of value from someone by offering a product, service, or investment opportunity that does not live up to its claims. And that was supposedly in relation to selling stock in the Black Star Line. So yes, this pardon is being hailed as a big deal because Garveyites, advocates, legal scholars for years had been calling for a pardon and or exoneration for Garvey. Now, people had hoped it would have come from US President Barack Obama, seeing that he was the US's first black president, but nope. So Biden did it. And just to make the distinction, what happened here was a pardon, a presidential pardon, which is within the power of the President of the United States. It's not an exoneration. All right. So a pardon means essentially that you're being forgiven for something you did that's wrong. An exoneration done by a court actually clears you of a previous conviction that you had. And seeing that the consensus is that Garvey was arrested on trumped-up charges and that he was convicted by a kangaroo court, he really should be exonerated. I remember, though, hearing a U.S. official say some years ago that given the kind of backlog they have in the courts, it's hard to justify spending the time and the money it would take to go through an exoneration process to clear Garvey, who is dead. And I can't see what they mean. No, I do appreciate and applaud the work of people who have spent years.
So Dion actually brought up a good point. We talked about this with Pelleter last week because I was wondering, why did they settle for
clemency
versus a full pardon? That's probably why, money.
Yes and no. I mean, theoretically, he could have also pardoned Peltier,
right?
Because it's like it's the same. What she's saying is like they could have gotten through the courts. The only problem is that the courts are so stacked right now. I don't know if that would ever make it through, even if you took the time to,
Right.
So,
but I have to wonder if it's a similar thing though with Peltier though. Like,
I think that's
more
more
time, which meaning more money, and like
I think there's even with pardoning. Most people think with a pardon that is an exoneration to the in the public eye, even though it's not legally, right? Like, so I don't even think they wanted to give Peltier that, because that like encourages more of the behavior,
Right.
Like they still want a head on a spike, even though that head is 80 years old and going to be stuck on a house arrest, So, like with this doesn't hurt anybody to go full pardon. This doesn't piss anybody off. So, they're like, fine, But she is right. Legally, exoneration would be better. But, so.
I mean, the man's dead, so
who
cares?
Who cares? Right. So, I mean, I imagine the estate of whatever estate is left of the Garvey estate, but, otherwise. But let's listen to a little bit more.
Is working on this, right? Howard University said that for the last 15 years, one of their professors, Justin Hanford, has been working with Garvey's son, Julius Garvey, on this issue of a pardon for Marcus Garvey. And they said that the effort to convince President Biden to pardon Garvey included letters from 21 members of Congress, mostly as you probably can expect from the Congressional Black Caucus. And the letter said exonerating Mr. Garvey would honor his work for the Black community, remove the shadow of an unjust conviction, and further your administration's promise to advance racial justice. So big up to them. But I have to tell you, neither this pardon from the US president or the idea of an exoneration from the US courts really matters that much to me. So it's not that I'm opposed to this, right? I wouldn't be fighting it. I've done a whole heap of interviews over the years on my programs about the campaign for the pardon, the campaign for the exoneration. But the more I've thought about it over the years, I just don't think it matters that much to me if the US courts, if the US president, if the US government wants to admit that Garvey was wrongly convicted or not. For me at this point, it's just part of his story. It's part of his wonderful history, his wonderful, rich history. The story of how this black man from Jamaica.
What happened?
In the 1920s went to the United States and amassed this following of thousands of people. Imagine him in the 1920s leading a crowd of 50,000 in a parade through the streets, right? And how the US authorities were so afraid of him that they just had to get him out of the way. Once we acknowledge him, I don't care if they do. And what is more important to me is the work that we are doing here at home to honor and to acknowledge Garvey. So let me acknowledge, we have named some stuff after him. Recently, the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation named a council room after him because he used to be a councillor in the KCAC. We have Marcus Garvey Drive, we have Marcus Garvey High School. We're very good at naming things and we're very good at issuing statements. Where we fall down is in some of the fundamental actual work. And I'm talking here about the stuff that's right in front of us, the stuff that is 100% within our control. And I'm talking here about teaching Garvey's philosophy in schools. You see, while we're running up and down, lobbying the US government and creating excitement over this part,
which they're not going to do.
No!
Because
no!
God forbid. God
forbid
you teach Black children about unity and the idea of what he was trying to promote in terms of Black power, or at least the beginnings of, and how, God forbid,
Pan-Africanism alone. They'd be like, no. We need those resources. Don't do that.
You know what? This is what kind of pisses me off about some African Americans, because they will call this, we don't need to know about this stuff. We don't need to, but as I read, he's connected to Malcolm X. He's connected to the Black Panther Party. He's connected to Martin Luther King. So they acknowledged him, in terms of how they essentially how they became
I just find it funny
that they are in America because of him, and he is Jamaican. So, so all the mushmouth people who are like, we don't need to.
There's this thing about American exceptionalism, right? Where we revolted against the British and we got our independence. Yet you had to call fucking Lafayette over, dog. Like, we needed the French Navy. All right? Like, there's reasons why, like, even then, it was an international issue, an international trade problem, right? And France was about to have its own revolution, which we helped
Right.
them. So, and what did they break out for that crap? Huh? Y'all remember? Y'all remember that good French word? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, people don't, you got to look things at a little broader than just your local area
Right.
sometimes.
So this is why I don't get the beef online towards Black immigrants and African Americans who feel like we have to work separately. Like,
yeah, it's purpose division.
Right. It's division on purpose. And then, as I said, the idea that many of the people in America that we respect got their ideas from other people, Black people from other nations. Marcus Garvey, in particular, as we said, had an influence of both Malcolm X and MLK. And the Black Panther Party, who, even in our space, a lot of people kind of talk in a highlight. Yes, but they got a lot of their basis of Garvey.
Mm-hmm.
So it's imperative that we understand, even with the fathers of the movement, so to speak,
well,
were
especially
inspired
when
by other.
the Caribbean is so important to this aspect
Right.
of, like, I don't know, there's a few islands that y'all got control of. Like, maybe you
Right.
should go look at them and see what they did.
Right.
Like any of those things. I think that's the thing of, like, now look, there's definitely parts of this discussion where, like, yeah, we probably shouldn't be sending tons of, like, money and military aid to places around the world. Yeah, sure, definitely keep those resources here on that. We could definitely use some healthcare and infrastructure, but having said that, it doesn't mean you just completely ignore the international issues.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, but anyway,
Keep going.
Yep.
Harden and continuing to call for an exoneration. All of that is all very well and good, but we're not handling our business here at home. Like everything else, what we've done here is, it's like peanuts. It's performative. It's not substantial. I can't tell you. I cannot tell you how many years we've been talking about teaching Garvey in schools. So in 2012, big announcement, right? This was 13 years ago, half a generation. The proud announcement that the teaching of Garvey finally was being officially launched in schools. Then Education Minister Ronald Reagan said this. He said, today, resolutely and over all the grades of schools from pre-primary up to grade 11. You hear what I say? Pre-primary up to grade 11. We say as a people that we honor our own and that we will uplift the values and attitudes of our people. We will remember one amongst us who struggled so that we could have that second emancipation, which is our right and our heritage. Sound good, not true? So what is Dion complaining about? Well, tell me then why. 8 years after that launch, 8 years, meaning a child would have finished high school, start high school and finish high school. 8 years after that launch in 2020, historian Professor Rupert Lewis was calling for Garvey to be taught in schools. Tell me, how? Tell me why in 2023 we now have another proud announcement by another education minister saying we will be teaching Garvey to almost 2,000 children. All right. Now, this wasn't even a national program, and even worse than that, it wasn't even a Ministry of Education program. Education Minister Favour Williams says the initiative was first introduced to the curriculum unit of the ministry in July 2022 by a private entity. I don't understand. What do you mean first introduced? So, one to 2012.
Yes.
In other words, the establishment.
By a private entity. Yeah.
So the establishment. So in other words, I want to bet they don't want Harvey to be taught in schools. Because God forbid that you actually rise up at, like, woke Caribbean Jamaican kids, So yeah, so I think and they do the same thing here. So don't get it twisted. Like, you
Oh,
know,
no, there's
I think it's a
definitely-
great. I think they use it as a great talking point. Obviously,
Yeah.
given the significance of Garvey in
there's-
Jamaica, especially, but they don't want the effect of it.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want the uprising from it. So
No.
but yeah,
Clearly
it's
there's
just
fuckery afoot, as it would be put. Like, I keep waiting for the bumba clots to get thrown in. You know what I mean? Like, I'm down.
Launch. What happened to that? What happened to the work that was done for the 2012 launch? In 2024, we were told that the program was now in 23 primary schools. Look, I'm not trying to discredit the work that these people are doing, right? A little work certainly is better than no work. 23 schools certainly is better than 0 schools. I am saying, though, that we're a pack of jokers in this country. We're teaching Garvey in 23 primary schools, and we have 1,010 primary and secondary schools in Jamaica. You know, so we're not serious. We can't move forward on anything because we take this project approach to everything, all right? We make a big announcement. We have something going for 2 years in a limited area, in a limited way, and then the money run out, everybody go home. And then in another 2 or 3 or 5 years, we get some more money and we start the whole thing all over again. It's just a cycle, and we keep repeating it over and over, and that's why we can't reach nowhere. Look, there is no fundamental belief by the authorities over the years in this country that Marcus Garvey's beliefs are worth permanent incorporation into the curriculum of our schools at all levels. You know how I can say this? Because we're not doing it. It's all about announcements being made for the media, some work that's done, and then everything falls apart until another set come in another 5 years and start the whole thing all over again. Time with it, they run up and down to the US about pardon and exoneration and happy now with this pardon and creating excitement over whatever foreign government wants to do or not do. We would be sorting out our own business. It's just part of this phenomenon in Jamaica where we are so much more concerned about external validation than internal validation. Once somebody of foreign says something about one away, it's a big thing, right? But you say something here at home, nobody pay you any mind. We're just we're still foreign minded. We're still outward looking. We're not inward looking. And the issue of Garvey is just one more example of this, along with the Jamaican language. But another video for that another day. There are just so many wonderful ideas that Garvey had that would be of so much benefit to our young people nowadays, many of whom are just struggling with identity and with self-worth and with self-esteem. There is a lot to be learned from Garvey in that regard. We need to get serious about the things that are within our control. Teach Garvey in school at all levels in a fun, learner-centric, activity-based, practical way that will really mean something to children. Then you can come to me and create excitement about what some other government do in some other country. So Garvey said, up ye mighty race, accomplish what ye will. There you have the magic word right there. Will. Where's the will? Thank you so much for watching. I'm Dion, and that's the tea.
Nope.
I mean, you
Again,
know, she said that Jamaica are far.
I'm betting that's hibiscus tea. I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think we here are too closed-minded or too isolationist-minded that we always have to think about ourselves, and not necessarily there's anything wrong with that, but need to be open. But I think the idea of being open to other ways of thinking, of other ways that can be done outside of our American bubble, I think also need to be brought into. Also need to be brought into the chat, and we often cast that aside. And I think, and I kind of feel that way too, in a way. You know, personally, just me being international, that often that when I share my views, it's often kind of looked at, who the hell are you to kind of talk to me, you know? But you know, but as I said,
get used to it. Sorry, no, shouldn't be like that.
But all that to say, again, and Dion said it, thank you, that this is nothing more than a symbolic gesture that Biden did. Just, yeah. You gave Jamaica, you know, you gave Jamaica some praise for a couple of seconds, but what is and I would make that argument here. What would be the significance of Garvey here? Like, no one's going to care that much. So really, so it'd be just something that you can kind of say that Biden did for a few seconds, and then you can just brush it aside and move on. But
Yeah.
not talking about the significance of what he was trying to implement, and how, again, if people were taught, oh no, he actually, if it wasn't for Marcus Garvey, we may not have a Malcolm X, or we may not have these figures are more prevalent in our community, that it might start having people question, oh, so what did Harvey teach about? What was it that kind of inspired these other leaders to want to kind of continue
Well,
in
that
his steed?
part of that goes with
in
like
front?
anti-intellectualism in general, you know?
Mm,
Like, and there's plenty of reasons for that. The college system is not great when it's for profit, you know, and
Right.
it's definitely exploitative and classist and lots of things. But education isn't and shouldn't be, you know. It
Right.
should be what you strive for, to be well educated, you know.
Educated.
You know,
Well, I would also
think
say this, because Leon said it too. You need to have the will to do it. So if it were me as a teacher, I wouldn't wait. Like, I wouldn't wait for any like curriculum developer to develop a curriculum.
do it anyway,
You know,
if you can.
I'll do it anyway. You
Yeah.
know, and if you're that skilled as a teacher, you should be able to do it. So there's really no reason why teachers can't take it upon themselves to do it.
Well, and not just
But again,
teachers. I mean, if you have any of those skills, animation, video production, any of those things, being that, you know, educating your people in that way is, I think, useful, you know,
Right.
and not enough of
ask
it is
my dad.
happening.
He'd be more than willing to come to Jamaica and teach the kids.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm dead serious. He would like give him that
Yeah.
opportunity, and he will fly on the next plane out and do it. But like, and I'm saying that because like the history is there, the people are there already. Like, you don't need to wait, but it's just the idea of mobilizing people in order to get it done. So
Well,
it's just
especially
kind
from the
of what
people
we-
from the global south there, you know, the Caribbean, South America have probably been the most recent exploited, you know, countries. Not that Africa also isn't still, but,
Mhm.
you know, like, I mean, we just banana republics and all that stuff, all part of that, you know. So, and right in that era, from the 20s to the 40s to pre-World War II to after World War II, it's all right there, pretty accessible to people to go read and learn about. So get to learning,
But-
folks. You know,
Yeah.
you might find
But-
some solutions in there. So
But yeah, I thought it was interesting. I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to report on the story since last week, but
yes, sir.
you know, but I think this is just kind of another example of the symbolism that the Democratic Party gives to Black people, and how they're not really serious in actually giving justice to Black people in terms of giving them tangible things that would affect their lives. It's just the idea of a name, or the idea of the look or the words, but not the actions, and not the policy, more importantly, that will actually uplift Black people in terms of the liberation that the Black people have been wanting.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is why such stories like these we're as a channel demonetized. So if you want us to talk about other stories such as these, and if you have your smartphone, please scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can type in the link that you see on your screen, the Ko-fi link. If you're in the chat, you can type in !donate, all one word, and the link will pop up for you, and you're able to donate. And again, as little as a dollar helps us towards the channel. Obviously, we know right now that people are kind of down and out and not making the money that they need in order to survive. So the free version, if you want to support us, is don't forget to like and subscribe, and please make sure to share our content to help us fight the suppression, and make sure to leave a comment. Did you know about Marcus Garvey being pardoned? How do you feel about this symbolic gesture that Biden gave, to the Black community? And do you agree what Dion said in terms of the agency that people need in order to make things happen, not just in Jamaica, but in the world at large, and in your communities at large. And help us get to free K. We are getting there slowly, but we appreciate you all liking and subscribing to us in order to get our numbers up and more people are able to see our work. And thank you for watching. We love you.
We love yous.